My grandson served me leftovers on Thanksgiving, so I blocked their heritage. It happened last November, when I traveled across the state to be with my son Todd, his wife Marlene, and their only child Brandon. Todd insisted I come, saying, "It would be a quiet family dinner, just the four of us." I hadn't seen them since the pandemic, and despite some tensions over the years, I still hoped to feel something that resembled family again. I baked my sweet potato casserole, packed it in foil pans, and rode 3 hours by bus to their town, holding the warm tray on my lap the whole way. I arrived early, carrying that same dish I'd made every year since Todd was a boy. The house was decorated for the holiday. The scent of rosemary and turkey filled the air, and for a brief second, I felt something soft bloom in my chest. I knocked, and Brandon opened the door. He's 16 now, taller, broader, and colder. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. "Oh, Grandma," he said flatly, walking away without helping me with my things. I stepped inside, carefully removing my coat, and placed the casserole on the kitchen counter. Marlene entered a few minutes later, her eyes skimming over me like I was furniture. "You brought something?" she asked, already opening the oven to check her own tray. "That's sweet." No hug. No welcome. Todd eventually came downstairs. "Hey, Ma," he said with that detached voice of someone doing a chore. He hugged me briefly, patted my back once. I hadn't raised my expectations high, but even this felt off. The whole time I was there, nobody really looked at me. They talked around me, never to me. Marlene asked Brandon how school was going, and he went on about his AP classes and basketball practice. I tried to join in. "Remember when you used to play in my backyard?" I said with a smile. He didn't respond. Dinner was served around 5:30. The table was already set with 3 plates, just 3, and mine was nowhere in sight. I waited, assuming they'd forgotten. But instead of correcting the oversight, Brandon walked to the fridge, pulled out a Tupperware container with some older-looking food, scooped it onto a paper plate, and handed it to me. "Here, Grandma, this is fine, right?" he said, not even making eye contact. It was cold stuffing, a scoop of dry green beans, 1 slice of dark turkey meat. "Is this what you're eating?" I asked quietly. "No," he said. "That's what we had last night, but we didn't want to waste it." I sat there, holding the plate, while the 3 of them took their seats at the actual dining table, plates full of freshly roasted food. Marlene poured wine. Todd carved into a juicy turkey breast. Brandon laughed at something Marlene said about someone from her book club. I wasn't invited to the table. I ate at the kitchen counter, alone. It would have hurt less if it had been strangers. But it was my family. The same people I'd helped so many times. I had loaned Todd money when he was out of work. I helped with Brandon when he was a baby and Marlene had postpartum. I used to drive an hour every Sunday to bring them groceries during hard times. And now, I was just an old woman with a paper plate. No one said thank you for the casserole. No one even tried it. Later that evening, as they were having dessert, pumpkin pie I hadn't been offered, Marlene asked if I could help out by signing a few documents related to the house. "Just a few things for future planning," she said casually. Todd added, "It's just to make it easier when that time comes." "What time?" I asked, though I already knew. He looked uncomfortable. "You know, just down the road. If anything happens, the house, the paperwork, it's complicated, and we just want to simplify." He had brought out a manila folder from his bag. I didn't touch it. Instead, I stood up slowly and told them I had a headache. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling fan turning overhead, feeling like a fool. I thought about the phone calls I had made trying to keep in touch, the birthday cards I'd mailed to Brandon every year without fail. I thought about how Todd used to beg me to pick him up early from school because Marlene forgot again, and I always did. Not skim milk. Real food. Hot food. No one else served me, and no one dismissed me. I poured myself a glass of wine. I didn't toast. I didn't say anything sentimental. I just ate, and it was the best holiday I'd had in years. Later that evening, I pulled out the letter again. Reread it under the kitchen light. Still didn't respond. But I didn't put it away either. I left it visible. Visible is enough sometimes. The next week, Diane called. "I've got good news," she said. "The county sent final confirmation. The estate transfer and charitable fund allocation are fully recorded. No more questions. No more review periods. It's official. Even the shelter portion, all done. The Eleanor room is permanently funded. They can't touch a thing." I thanked her, hung up, and stood in the middle of my living room. Not proud, not triumphant, just steady. That same afternoon, I took out a folder from the cabinet. Inside were the final copies of my will, the property deed, and a personal letter I'd written months earlier. It was addressed simply, "To be opened when necessary." I placed it back in the folder and sealed it. Then I opened the box Brandon had left, on my porch weeks before, the one I had put in the basement. I took out the 2 framed photos, one of him at age 5 in my arms at the zoo, and one of the 3 of us when Todd still smiled for real. I placed the photo of the zoo on my shelf. I kept the other one in the box. That's how I made my peace, with it. I didn't need to erase the past, but I wasn't going to display it either. From then on, the calls stopped completely. They must have finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't playing games. I had simply moved on. Todd never came back to the house. Marlene never sent another email. Brandon didn't send a second letter. Maybe they were waiting for time to soften the edges, to make me second-guess what I'd done. But the truth is, every day that passed made me more certain. They never asked themselves the right question. It wasn't about why I cut them off. It was why it took me so long. Weeks turned to months. I kept living. I taught crochet at the community center. I baked. For the shelter once a month. I had coffee with Nadine every Sunday and joined a small book club that actually finished its books. And one day, I got a thank you card from a young woman named Shelley, the first person to stay in the Eleanor room. She didn't know me. She didn't need to. She just wrote, "Thank you for giving me a safe place to start over. I don't know what I'd do without this room. I hope you know what a difference you've made." I placed that card next to Brandon's letter. Side by side, one from blood, one from a stranger. Both had weight, but only one came with expectation. Only one felt pure. That's the difference, and that's why. When people ask me if I regret anything, I tell them no. Because when the people who should have protected your dignity instead treat it like an inconvenience, you don't owe them another opportunity. You owe yourself peace, and peace is finally what I have. And then came the final move. I was at the community center that next weekend, helping sort donations for the coat drive. Nadine was with me. Around mid-morning, she pulled me aside with a look on her face I hadn't seen before. "I got a call from Marlene," she said. I stopped. "What?" "She said she was trying to reach you and that you weren't well. She asked if I had noticed any mental changes. If I thought maybe you were being manipulated." I laughed. Actually laughed. "She called you?" Nadine nodded, clearly disgusted. "She said she was worried about you. Said maybe someone was taking advantage of you at the shelter, convincing you to sign things. They're planting a case. Are you going to let them?" "No," I said. "I'm going to end it." That night, I sat down at my desk and wrote a public statement. Not on social media. Just a letter I sent to 10 people in my life who mattered. Family friends, church members, community board leaders. I am of sound mind, in good health, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Any claims made otherwise by Todd or Marlene Landry should be considered false and driven by financial interest. I have made my decisions not out of impulse, but out of years of observation and experience. My estate, my legacy, and my story belong to me. Signed. Dated. Notarized. It was a message. Not for them. For me. A line in the sand. And with that, I ended it. No more games. No more visits. No more slow poisoning of what little trust had once existed. They could keep the mailbox they bought, the copies of keys they tried to make, the voicemail threats and manipulative emails. I would keep my house, my peace, my decisions, and a plate, warm, full, mine. The final break came quietly. No shouting, no confrontation, no late-night calls or surprise visits. Just silence. And then, something unexpected. Brandon sent a handwritten letter. It arrived 3 weeks before the next Thanksgiving. I found it in my red mailbox, postmarked from their city. Not a card, not a typed note. Real pen on real paper, addressed to Mrs. Ruth Landry, like I was some stranger he'd never met. I sat at my kitchen table and read every word. Grandma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't even know if you'll read this, but I wanted to try. I've been thinking about everything that happened, about how I acted, about the things I didn't say. The way I treated you was wrong. I didn't realize how much it meant to you, or how little I showed that I cared. I see it now. Dad's been angry all the time. Mom doesn't talk about it. They pretend like it's normal again, but it's not. It hasn't been since that day. I guess what I'm saying is, I miss you. And I'm sorry. Not because someone told me to say it, because I mean it. I don't know if I deserve to be in your life again, but I hope maybe one day I can earn that back. He signed it simply, Brandon. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the edge of the table. Then I left it there. For 3 days, I didn't respond. I didn't throw it away either, because I needed time to sit with what it was and what it wasn't. It was honest. Or at least, it sounded honest. There was no request for money. No mention of the house. No reference to the will. It wasn't another play. It felt like an attempt at decency. But I wasn't ready to give him what he was asking for. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because trust doesn't return just because someone decides they want it back. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, Nadine came over with her homemade cranberry bread. We sat in the kitchen and caught up on community center news, laughed about the time one of the shelter's volunteers accidentally donated her husband's winter coat, and compared notes on recipes for stuffing. Halfway through her second cup of coffee, she looked at the envelope still sitting on the corner of the table. "You going to answer that?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe not ever." She nodded. Didn't push. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time in decades, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't take a bus. I didn't pack a casserole. I didn't sit at anyone else's table waiting to be acknowledged. I stayed home. I set my own table. Not a big one, just 2 seats. One for me, one for possibility. I cooked everything I wanted. Turkey breast with garlic butter, green beans sautéed with almonds, mashed potatoes with cream. They were attempting to contest my most recent will. The letter claimed that the changes I made, removing Todd, Marlene, and Brandon from all inheritance, redirecting assets to a non-family beneficiary, were made under mental duress, citing my age and ongoing isolation. I read it twice before calling Diane. "They're using your age as leverage," she said. "They're claiming your decision-making is compromised." I see that. They're not filing for guardianship, at least not yet, but they're laying the groundwork. It's a pressure move. They want to scare me into reversing the will. Exactly. I hung up, walked over to my small kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hand wasn't shaking. I wasn't upset. I wasn't shocked, but I was tired, not of defending myself. I could do that all day. What exhausted me was how predictable it had all become. Every time they hit a wall, they reached for a crowbar. They didn't stop to ask what had gotten us here. They never asked why I had changed the will. They only wanted to undo it, as if erasing my choices would restore their comfort. But that's not how any of this works. 2 days later, Diane filed a formal response. It included documentation of my legal capacity at the time of the changes, signed off by a licensed psychologist and a witness. It included the original will, the updated revisions, and full notarized records of every decision made, time-stamped, dated, and filed. We included a letter of our own. This correspondence serves as formal notice that any further attempts to challenge the legitimacy of Mrs. Landry's estate decisions without evidence or legal standing will be treated as harassment under civil code. Continued behavior of this nature will result in legal action. We also filed copies with the county court. Then I called the shelter. "Is the plaque ready?" I asked. "Yes, Mrs. Landry," they said. "We just finished installing it in the transitional suite." I made the drive that weekend, 2 hours each way. When I arrived, they showed me the door, Suite B. The brass plate was already affixed. The Eleanor room, gifted by Ruth M. Landry, my sister's name. She never had children, never had a family of her own. She lived alone for most of her life, taught high school history, and passed away quietly in her sleep. For years, I had promised myself I'd do something in her name. And now I had. I stood in that small room, twin bed, dresser, fresh linens, a basket of hygiene supplies on the table, and felt more peace than I'd known in months. This wasn't about revenge. This was about redirecting everything they had taken for granted into something that mattered. When I got home, the voicemails had returned. Todd again. "Ma, I just heard what you did with the shelter." "A whole room? You're donating your estate to strangers now?" "Strangers." He said the word like it was an insult. Next message. "Marlene, colder than usual. Ruth, I don't know what kind of narrative you're spinning, but you're cutting your own blood out of your life over." "What? A bad holiday dinner? You think the shelter's going to remember your birthday?" I didn't answer either one, but I listened to every word, carefully, because they had finally said it out loud. This wasn't about care. This wasn't about love. This was about entitlement, about their assumption that I owed them something for being born. That dinner, the leftover plate, the signatures, the way I was treated like background noise in my own family, that wasn't the cause of the split. It was the proof. They had revealed exactly how little they thought of me. They had handed me that plate with the same mindset they now approached the will. "You don't matter anymore, but you still owe us something." I didn't owe them anything. Not after the loans I never asked repayment for. Not after the babysitting. Hours I gave without complaint. Not after the house I repaired, the groceries I bought, the emergencies I covered, the silence I swallowed every time Marlene made a passive remark about old people being stuck in their ways. That was done now. I blocked their numbers. Permanently. I didn't need updates. I didn't need fake reconciliation. I needed distance. I started locking my gate at all times. I set up a camera at the porch. Not out of paranoia, out of clarity. This was no longer a family matter. It was a boundary. They had crossed it too many times. But restrained. His shoulders slouched forward like he wasn't sure how to stand. "Grandma," he said, "can I talk to you?" I didn't move. "About what?" He shifted on his feet. I wanted to give you this." He held out. "The box. What is it?" "Stuff I had at home. Pictures, letters, things you gave me. I thought you might want them back." I didn't take it. "Why now?" He looked down. "I don't know. Dad said you don't want anything to do with us anymore." "That's not true," I said. "I want nothing to do with people who treat me like furniture." He flinched. "I didn't mean," he started. "But you did," I cut in. "That day at Thanksgiving, when you handed me that plate like I was a guest you forgot about, that wasn't a mistake. That was how you saw me." "I was just being dumb," he mumbled. "No, Brandon. You were being raised that way." He looked like he wanted to say something else but didn't know how. "You came here because you were told to?" I asked. He hesitated. They didn't force me. I mean, they're stressed. About the money, the paperwork. They thought maybe if I talked to you. There it is. I nodded. That was the real reason. Not regret, not recognition, just strategy. I'm not mad at you, I said finally, but I see you clearly now. And you don't get to come here and pretend we're fine just because things didn't go your way. He stood in silence. I don't want the box, I said. But it's your stuff. It was a gift, I said. Once a gift leaves your hands, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Keep it or throw it away. Either way, it's yours now. He looked stunned. Maybe no one had ever talked to him like that before. Maybe no one ever handed him a firm no without folding 5 minutes later. He set the box down gently on the porch. I'll go, he said quietly. Good. He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. I left the box outside until nightfall. When I opened it, it was mostly things I had completely forgotten about. Birthday cards I'd written over the years, a copy of a poem I once included in a graduation note, 2 framed photos of him as a child with me at the zoo, and on the bottom, a letter, folded neatly. A thank you note I'd written him the year he made me a handmade Mother's Day card. I'd written, "You're the best. Boy, I know. You have the kindest heart. Never lose that." I put the letter back in the box, closed it, and stored it in the basement. Let him come get it one day, if he ever learns the difference between kindness and manipulation. That same week, Marlene finally broke the silence. She sent me an email. Short, cold, no greetings. Ruth, I think it's clear by now that you've made decisions you feel are justified. I'll only say this. When your name is no longer attached to any part of the family, don't expect to be welcomed back when you regret it. I didn't respond, but I forwarded it to Diane. She filed a restraining notice. It wasn't a full protection order. That wasn't necessary. But it was a legally binding notification that any further harassment, intimidation, or attempts to assume financial or legal control of my estate would be met with court action. It was dry, technical, and effective. By the following week, I had my locks changed again. Diane sent out a cease and desist, and I made a quiet donation to the charity I had chosen as my estate's primary beneficiary, a women's shelter, 3 towns over, one I'd volunteered at for over a decade. I asked them to name a room after my sister. They said yes. That night, I made myself a simple dinner: roasted turkey breast, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, a warm roll with butter. Plated it all properly. I sat at the table, placed a cloth napkin in my lap, and ate slowly. No leftovers, no paper plates, no apologies. After the mailbox, the gate, and the failed attempts through Brandon, I assumed they had run out of options. But the truth is, people, like Todd and Marlene, people who spend years believing something belongs to them just because they expect it, they don't stop. They recalculate, they look for side doors, and when they can't find one, they try to break the window. It came in the form of a letter, not an email, not a phone call. A typed letter on professional letterhead from a law office I didn't recognize. Wilcox and Harper, Estate Mediation Group. At first, I thought it was another mediation invitation, but it wasn't. You taught that boy, both of you did, to see me as a burden, as someone to tolerate, not respect. He gave me leftovers, Todd, and not once did you tell him that was wrong. You sat there and carved your turkey while I ate by myself. You brought me papers to sign without explanation. And now you're here saying I should reconsider? I didn't know about the fund, he said. If I had known, but you didn't, because you never asked. You never talked to me unless you wanted something. He shifted his weight uncomfortably. So that's it? We're just cut off? No, I said. You cut yourselves off. I just made it official. He looked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. And for the first time in years, he didn't seem like the adult son I once leaned on. He looked like a boy who had finally been told no for the first time in his life. I hope Brandon learned something from this, I said. Because if he doesn't, he'll repeat it. And one day, someone will hand him a plate of leftovers and tell him it's what he deserves. Todd didn't argue. He turned to go. I meant it when I said we loved you, he said, pausing at the steps. I believe you, I replied. But you loved me on your terms, not mine. He didn't look. Back as he walked down the sidewalk, I watched from the doorway until he disappeared. Then I shut the door, locked it, and went back to reading my book. 2 weeks passed after Todd's visit, and I didn't hear another word from any of them. No calls, no letters, not even a last-ditch email from Marlene. At first, I thought that was the end of it, that they'd finally understood the meaning of a boundary. I thought they'd take their bruised egos and go back to their lives. I was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I had gone out early to meet Nadine for breakfast. We usually met twice a month at Ed's Diner off Route 14, where the coffee's too strong and the eggs are always overcooked, just the way we liked them. When I got home, I pulled into my driveway and stopped halfway. Something was wrong. My mailbox, the sturdy black one I'd had installed 4 years ago, was missing. In its place was a brand new white one. Not just a new box, an entirely new post cemented into the ground, with a brass nameplate screwed into the front. Landry family, not Ruth Landry. Not Mrs. Ruth Landry, just Landry family. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I got out. There were fresh tire tracks across the edge of my lawn. I followed them around to the side of the house and stopped short again. The lock on the side gate had been replaced. My gate. My lock. A brand new silver padlock now hung on the latch. The kind you buy at a hardware store when you think you're securing something that belongs to you. But it wasn't theirs. I walked up to it, heart pounding, and tried the old key from my ring. It didn't fit. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I just went straight inside, pulled out the folder where I kept my property documents, and called Diane. They installed a new mailbox with their name, I told her, changed the gate lock. I don't know what else they did. She didn't sound surprised. That's a quiet form of property intimidation. Subtle, not illegal, but designed to suggest occupancy. We'll take care of it. Is this a thing people actually do? Yes, she said, especially when they're desperate. By noon, Diane had filed a formal complaint with the county, and she dispatched a property agent to inspect the perimeter and document the changes. I had everything photographed, mailbox, lock, even the tire prints. Within 48 hours, the county issued a written warning to all unauthorized parties attempting to alter private property boundaries or fixtures. I also had the gate lock cut and replaced with a coded padlock, and I changed the code every week after that. But I wasn't done. I took down the mailbox myself. I bought a plain black one and bolted it back into place with my full name on it. Ruth M. Landry. I painted the post red, bright red. There would be no more confusion about who lived there, but that wasn't the end of it either. 3 days after the mailbox incident, Brandon showed up. Not with Todd, not with Marlene, alone. He knocked. This time, I didn't ignore it. When I opened the door, he was standing there holding a box. Just a plain cardboard box. His face looked different, not softer. After I sent those certified letters, the phone went silent. No more calls, no more voicemails, not even a vague text from Brandon. It was like they had finally accepted it, or so I thought. But I've been alive long enough to know that silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just planning. And sure enough, they weren't done. They were just shifting tactics. It started when Diane called me one Friday morning. "You've been removed as primary contact for the HVAC contract on your house," she said. Did you authorize that? I hadn't. Todd had handled it for me years ago during a repair issue, and I never switched it back. Apparently, he tried to update it again, this time listing himself as the property manager. Diane had intercepted the notification through the title office. I had to file a formal statement that I was the sole owner. Then came the lawn service invoice. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Landry. My name wasn't even mentioned. Just their address, my address, with their names printed as if they'd already moved in. I called the service provider. They said Marlene had called to pre-arrange future billing under the new ownership. The new ownership. They really thought it was a done deal. That once I was gone, or maybe even before, they would just slide right in, as if I were a piece of furniture being phased out. As if I hadn't built that house one paycheck at a time after my husband passed, laying down each foundation stone by myself, choosing every cabinet handle, negotiating every repair. They were rehearsing the takeover, and I was still very much alive. That weekend, I had Diane install a clause in the property title restricting any transfer or claim from any member of my direct family, unless explicitly authorized through my notarized signature. I even had it filed with the county clerk. They would need a court order to touch that house now, and they weren't getting one. Still, the next play came fast. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from a mediation firm in Madison. It was worded politely, with all the usual phrasing, hoping to resolve a misunderstanding, establishing a shared vision, prior agreements. I called Diane. They're trying to mediate what they think is a dispute, she said. But there is no dispute. You have the full rights. They're fishing. Let them fish. I didn't reply, but I knew what would come next. And it did. They showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I heard the knock. I was reading by the window, the winter light pouring in, soft and gray. At first, I thought it might be Nadine or someone from the community garden board, but when I opened the door, Todd was standing there, alone. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but diminished. His coat was wrinkled, his eyes tired. But his voice was the same, that measured salesman tone he used when he wanted something. "Hi, Ma," he said. "Can I come in?" "No," I replied simply. "You can speak from the porch," he blinked, not expecting that. "I just want to talk. That's all, I promise. No tricks, no papers." I crossed my arms. "Talk then." He sighed and shoved his hands into his pockets. "Look, I know things got out of hand. I know the Thanksgiving thing was awkward. Marlene and we didn't mean for it to come off that way. And the papers, that was just, we were trying to prepare, that's all." "Prepare for what, Todd?" He avoided my gaze. "We thought, I don't know, you're not getting younger, Ma, and the house is big. We figured maybe it'd be easier if—" "You figured," I interrupted. "You figured I'd just hand over everything without a word." He looked down at the porch boards. "No," he said finally. "I figured you trusted us." That sentence hung there for a second too long. "I did," I said quietly. "And you served me cold leftovers on a paper plate." He flinched. "That wasn't meant as disrespect." "But it was," I snapped. "And that's the point. You didn't even notice." There was a long silence. "I didn't come to fight," he said finally. "I came to ask you to reconsider. For Brandon, if not for me." My jaw tightened. "I had a plan," I told him. "For Brandon, I had land set aside, a college fund. Do you know that?" He looked up, surprised. "Well, I did. I was going to surprise him when he turned 18. I had everything ready." His eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Not anymore." He didn't speak. I turned on the answering machine. There were 3 new messages. One was from Todd, trying again, voice slightly more urgent. "Hey, Ma, did you get my message? Just checking in again. Give me a call when you can." The second was from Brandon. "Grandma, Dad said you left early because you weren't feeling well. Hope you're okay. I didn't mean anything by what I said. I wasn't trying to be rude. I mean, sorry if I was." That one lingered in my ears for a bit, but not because of remorse. It was the phrasing. Sorry if I was, not sorry I was. That told me all I needed. The third message, again from Marlene. was shorter. "Ruth, we really need to speak. It's about the property papers." So they finally realized. They had assumed I'd sign those documents like I always had before. Quietly, obediently. But this time I had left with the folder in my bag. And they couldn't claim ignorance anymore. Their plan had depended on my silence, and I had removed it. That weekend, I saw them in person again, though they didn't see me. I was at the local pharmacy picking up my prescription refill when I noticed them outside the financial branch across the parking lot. They weren't arguing exactly, but Marlene's arms were crossed, Todd was rubbing his temples, and Brandon stood nearby, staring at his phone like he wished he were anywhere else. I didn't approach them. I simply stood behind the pharmacy window, out of sight, and watched them through the glass. They looked like people scrambling to control something they believed they already owned. It made me think about the time, 4 years earlier, when Brandon got caught shoplifting earbuds from a department store. Todd had called me that night frantic. "Ma, can you talk to him? He respects you." I had driven over. I'd sat with Brandon on the porch and told him calmly, "When you take what isn't yours, people remember." He'd shrugged. It was just cheap junk. But I'd said something then that came back to me now. Cheap or not, it still didn't belong to you. That was the real story with them. They were trying to take something that wasn't theirs. Not just property, but legacy. Trust. Respect. They had already stopped seeing me as family. They saw me as a placeholder. They just didn't think the placeholder would move. A few days after that, the next escalation came. An email from a financial advisor I didn't recognize. "Dear Mrs. Ruth Landry, I represent Mr. Todd Landry and Mrs. Marlene Landry regarding certain estate planning concerns. I'd appreciate the opportunity to schedule a meeting, in person or via Zoom, to review the shared documentation." I forwarded it to Diane. She replied with a single sentence. "Already blocked them from access to all joint claims. You're clean." It was done. Still, the messages kept coming, but now they changed in tone. The polite check-ins became more aggressive. "Ma, this is ridiculous," Todd said in one voicemail. "You left things halfway. We had everything organized and now you've just... What? Ghosted us?" Ghosted. That's what he said. Then Marlene left one that I saved, just in case. "You're making a big mistake, Ruth. You're damaging the future of your own grandson over a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That's what they called it. Cold food on a paper plate, a forged signature request, a silent exile during dinner. Misunderstanding. On Sunday, I finally responded, with silence that they couldn't ignore. I sent them each a single certified letter, prepared by Diane. It stated in clear language that I had made final decisions regarding my estate, and that no further contact was necessary or welcome. No explanation. No emotional flourish, just boundaries, legally reinforced. Monday came and went without any reply, but on Tuesday morning I found something stuffed into my mailbox. No postage, no envelope, just a torn piece of notebook paper with sloppy handwriting. "Brandon. Grandma. I didn't know they were going to ask you to sign stuff. I didn't know. I was just being dumb. Please call me. B." I stared at it for a long time, and then I placed it in a box in the hallway closet, the one where I kept old family photos, letters, and things I didn't want to burn but couldn't display anymore. Brandon still had time to learn, but he'd learn without my help because I was done being the lesson. I was the one giving the test now. The following weeks were quieter than I expected. I remembered the time I sold my late husband's coin collection to help them make a down payment. And now? They fed me cold leftovers and asked for my signature. The next morning, I made myself coffee. No one else was awake. I took the folder they had left on the counter, placed it in my bag without opening it, and quietly left the house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. At the bus station, I sat alone for 45 minutes before boarding. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I'd cried too many times already over that family. When I arrived home, I placed the folder on the kitchen table and stared at it for hours. I finally opened it around dusk. The documents inside were exactly what I feared. A quiet, strategic transfer of shared property, a legal framework that would essentially give Todd control over my home, the same house I had worked to maintain since his father passed. They had even highlighted the sections for me to initial. No explanation. Just entitlement. That night, I took out my original will from the cabinet drawer and called my attorney first thing in the morning. What they didn't know, and what I had never told them, was that I had acquired a second piece of property, in my name alone. A small plot of land my late sister had left me before passing, and for years I had planned to leave it to Brandon. I had even set up a college savings fund in his name to use with it. Not anymore. The next day, I canceled the college fund. I transferred the land to an organization that builds community gardens in low-income neighborhoods. I rewrote my will. I made it airtight. Todd, Marlene, and Brandon were removed completely. Every penny, every parcel, every account. They would inherit nothing, not because of the money, but because of what they showed me that day. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a burden, as leftovers, something that was once useful, but no longer needed. They would learn what it meant to take someone for granted, and I would never serve them another chance again. The first sign that they noticed something was wrong came exactly 11 days after Thanksgiving. It was a Thursday morning, a little after 10 a.m., when I received the first voicemail from Todd. I didn't answer the call. I had already saved his number under a silent contact and turned off notifications. But curiosity got the better of me. I played the message while sipping my coffee in the kitchen. "Hey, Ma, just wanted to check in. You left kind of suddenly. Hope you got home okay. We missed saying goodbye. Call me when you get a second, okay?" There was no concern in his tone. Just that tight, rehearsed politeness that people use when they're managing a problem. I didn't call back. 3 hours later, I received another message. This one from Marlene. "Hi, Ruth. I think there was maybe a misunderstanding?" We left some paperwork out and hoped you'd take a look. It's nothing urgent, just Todd and I would love to walk through it with you. Maybe we can Zoom sometime? Let us know. Zoom. After serving me cold stuffing on a paper plate, they thought a video call was going to make it right. I deleted the message. That same day, I had a meeting scheduled with my attorney, Diane Curran. I'd worked with her for nearly 12 years, since my sister passed and left me the land parcel in Evansville. She had been the one who told me to hold off on transferring it back then. "No need to rush," she'd said. "Use it when it matters." Well, it mattered now. "I want the land transferred," I told her firmly, "and I want a clause added to my will. Nothing goes to Todd, Marlene, or Brandon. Nothing." She looked at me over her glasses. "I can do that, but are you sure? These things tend to create permanent rifts." I looked at her dead in the eye. "There's nothing to create. The rift is already there. I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't." She didn't push again. That afternoon, we rewrote the entire structure. Everything, from the house I lived in to the CDs I had with the local credit union, was redirected to either two charities I'd supported for years, or to a friend of mine from church, Nadine, who had helped me through my health scares in 2020. I named Nadine my medical proxy. I removed Todd from every document where his name had once appeared. I wasn't angry as I signed the papers. I wasn't even emotional. I was clear. When I got home later that evening,